So by far one of my favorite accessories to have on set is a wireless video feed. And thankfully nowadays, it doesn't have to be expensive or complicated thanks to companies like Hollyland. About a year or so ago, Hollyland sent out a kit with their Mars M1 monitor and Mars 4K transmitter and receivers. And I've been able to put them through the paces on all of my sets from super small to medium sized to large. And I must say, it's been an absolute game changer for me, and I can't go on set anymore without a wireless video feed. So first off, I want to talk about the Hollyland Mars 4K TX and RX. These are standalone units that have SDI and HDMI. They could transmit 4K up to 30 frames. Together, they're about $700, and they're pretty lightweight for what they are at 8 ounces or 223 grams. On these units, we have a couple quarter 20s to mount either to a friction arm, to a tripod, to a baby pin. There's a lot of different opportunities to mount because of these quarter 20s, and you can power them through NPF batteries, through the barrel connector, or through USB-C. So of course, there's more opportunities for that depending on your camera setup or really what the production needs. And you also get a little screen with a button that acts as like a selector. The menus are super simple, they're easy, they're intuitive, and they're just really quick to use. But yeah, these things have a low latency of 0.06 seconds. And with the transmitter, you can also send up to 2 wireless video feeds to the M1 monitors or 4 wireless feeds to the Hollyland app that's on mobile. So there's a lot of different options depending on what you need, but being able to send it to the monitor and app is just pretty clutch because you just never know what you'll have to use. So moving on to the Mars M1 monitor, this thing is super unique because it does 3 different things. 1, it's an on-camera monitor. 2, it can transmit footage. And 3, it can receive footage. So there's a lot of different opportunities for use cases with this monitor, which means it's super versatile and it's lovely to have in my camera kit. This thing is a 5.5-inch 1080p monitor. It's super crisp, it's sharp, it's color accurate. The menus are pretty snappy. The menus aren't really the best, but you're not really using the menus that much because you don't really have to. And you can also power it through DC input or even an NPF battery, and thankfully this monitor kind of trickles through battery. You definitely want a handful of NPF batteries though and a couple chargers just to make sure they're on rotation. You're not going to run out of battery. You can transmit and receive up to 4K 30, and I think the range is about 450 feet, which is pretty solid for a monitor of this price. And speaking of price, you can get this monitor for about $500. But yeah, overall this monitor is pretty solid. It's plenty bright at 1000 nits. It has a USB-C port. You can import your own 3D LUTs, and it also has a low latency of 0.08 seconds, which is a bit slower than the standalone transmitter, and that's definitely something we're going to be getting into later on in this video. So the setup of these units is pretty simple. Essentially, you need 2 things: a transmitter and a receiver. And thankfully with this kit, we have a handful of different options to choose from. We could do the standalone Mars 4K transmitter to the receiver, or Mars 4K transmitter to the M1 monitor, or transmitter to the app, or M1 monitor to the receiver, or M1 monitor to another M1 monitor, or M1 monitor to the Hollyland app. So there's a lot of different options, but I think the best setup that I found is the Mars 4K transmitter to the RX, or better yet, the Mars M1 monitor. This has been the absolute most dialed setup for me, the least amount of hiccups, and it just simply works. But like I said before, you can power these units in a handful of different ways. With the transmitter and receiver, you can do USB-C, which is pretty great if you have a power delivery USB bank. You can also do NPF batteries, which is my favorite way just because there's less cables, and NPF batteries usually last a long time and they're pretty light. Or you can use a D-tap to barrel connector, which is really nice too, but I would really love if those units can have a lock-in barrel connector, or better yet, a locking 2-pin LEMO. So because of all that, I find the NPF batteries are the best. With the transmitter, I can usually run 1 or 2 batteries per day, if that. And then with the Mars M1, I'm usually running 2 to 3 batteries per day. Just because it's a monitor and a screen, it requires more power draw. And then outside of that, you need to choose between HDMI and SDI, which is nice because now we can use these transmitters and receivers with a wide variety of cameras and monitors. So with my FX3 and C70, I use HDMI, and on my Komodo, I use SDI. Thankfully, with the small HD monitors, I can run HDMI in from camera and then HDMI out from the monitor to the transmitter, and it's been working pretty great. But that's pretty much all you need, and getting it started, you just simply turn it on. If you're running SDI, make sure you do SDI protocol, and once it's turned on, the Hollyland system starts like reading all the different frequencies to find the fastest and the least interrupted frequency to use. And once it's connected, once you start doing battery swaps and stuff, and you turn them back on, they'll auto connect. I've never had them mess up, and once they're in, and that's one of my favorite features about this Hollyland kit. But you might be wondering how I use these units in my own personal workflow, and I know a lot of you out there are probably looking at this system to use as a first AC monitor wireless feed for pulling focus, and I have never used it for pulling focus because of the latency issues, and We'll get to that. But I primarily use this as a client or director's feed. And I essentially just put my transmitter on the camera. I like rig it with the little friction arm. So I just have to kind of figure out where I want it placed with my C70, FX3, and Komodo X. It kind of all just depends on the setup that I have, the workflow that I'm doing, where I'm at. Because sometimes it's a little bit clunky setting it up like with a friction arm, but I'm okay with running it just because there's more benefits running wireless video than not. But I always run it as a client feed to that M1 monitor because the M1 monitor is so versatile. There's quarter 20s on there, so I can put it on a little tripod or put Peak Design straps and anchors on there. So then now my director or client now has like multiple options with carrying it. And I've also used like the little baby pin from the Amaran 60X and put it on like a little light stand. So there's so many different options for them to carry it, just depending on how they feel. Sometimes they'll just carry it around their neck and be nearby, or I'll put on the light stand and then they'll all kind of like crowd around it and review it. Yeah, at the end of the day, I just use this as a client feed just because I'm now able to give my client like a true like look into what I'm actually shooting, and like they can actually see it without like glare and like peeking over my shoulder as I'm moving. And honestly, we get better footage because they're now able to review it, be like, oh, we need another take, or oh, let's move that thing, or like get wardrobe or set design in there. Because the footage is the final product, being able to have that uninterrupted for them on set, it's such a luxury. It's almost a necessity for the majority of my projects. And because I'm doing a lot of variety in budgets for the smaller stuff, I'm now able to bring like the system like that normally wouldn't be there into this atmosphere because I own it. I'm not trying to rent these things out to them or like get budget from them to rent it, because that stuff gets pretty expensive pretty quick. Of course, the bigger projects we have budget to rent, so it's not a big deal, but I've definitely noticed a big difference on my smaller jobs where there's a couple of us, or if I'm working with a director or a photographer just directly, they're not able to see what I'm actually shooting, and it's a better collaborative effort instead of just being like, oh, like Thomas has got it, like he's fine. Like they're able to see things that I don't see because I'm so focused on pulling focus, framing, movement. They're able to like take a step back and actually see what I'm shooting and give me notes, which has been super helpful. But yeah, overall the distance and range out of the system has been pretty solid. There's been a couple times where I've noticed it cut out, and again, because the system's a budget option, it's affordable for what it is, I can't expect it to be like insanely good. The range says 450 feet, which I find that to be pretty true. There was one job where we needed like one final shot at the end of the day, and the photographer and I like ran off to go get that real quick. And when I got back, I asked the person that I was working with on client side if the feed cut out, and they said, yes, it did, which wasn't really that far away. Maybe it was around 400-ish feet. It wasn't the end of the world because like they knew that we got it after seeing like the stuff that we were shooting all day. So it's like, okay, like that's like now in my head, like the kind of range that we're dealing with. And the other scenario is when you're in a house with multiple walls, you can't be like across the house because it's not going to transmit through all those walls. The frequency isn't strong enough. So you definitely have to be like kind of around the corner, or at least like in the same vicinity or in the room. For most use cases, it's never been an issue. But when I'm out like in the mountains or desert or whatever, like I'm able to have people close by because they're able to be behind the camera. In a house, they're able to be around the corner. At least if one person on client side could be somewhat near the action, that's all I can really ask for. And it hasn't really been that big of an issue implementing the system on my larger sets. Now it's time for the elephant in the room, latency. And Hollyland claims that these monitors have low latency at 0.06 and 0.08 seconds, which I think is really slow for what it actually is. It's not fast by any means, but you have to come into the system with expectations and knowing that, yeah, the latency is slow, but it's going to excel as a client or director feed. A client or director doesn't need to see the footage frame by frame when it's actually happening, because that's not what their job is. They're trying to see what's actually being shot. And if it's happening a little bit behind real time, who cares? Because they're actually able to see what's actually happening, and they can see if it's in focus, the content, and all of that. The only person that needs to see it in real time is the DP or the cam op in the first AC or focus puller. I will never use this M1 monitor as an on-camera reference monitor, because even going from camera to that monitor with no wireless has latency issues. Yes, it's decent. Like if I'm doing interviews, whatever, I'm not worried about latency because I have autofocus. It's not the end of the world, but it's when I'm running around doing run and gun stuff, or if I have moving subjects, having something that's a little bit off of real time is going to make pulling focus a lot harder, because now I'm having to guess where they're actually going to be. And the same goes for a first AC. I've done a couple first AC jobs pulling focus, and you need to have something that has the fastest response time possible. And oftentimes that's a Teradek, or I forget what other like high-end brands, maybe Airy or something. There's certain transmitters out there that are truly real-time, or at least pretty identical to real-time, to where it's actually possible to pull focus one for one as the camera's moving. So yeah, don't go into the system expecting to pull focus easily. Sure, you can get by It's fine. I wouldn't recommend it if you're trying to do like actual legit work. If you're doing stuff for YouTube or for fun or for like short films or student stuff, you can get by. It's not going to be a fun experience, but that's definitely the only downside of the system, besides maybe having like a locking 2-pin LEMO connector or different mounting options. But outside of that, I can't fault them for this. It's a cheap system for what it is. It definitely serves better as a client feed. When Hollyland sent me this kit, they were only wanting to send out the M1 monitor, and I told them, I will not use this kit if you don't send me the transmitter and receiver, because I'm not using this as an on-camera monitor because of those latency issues. I have a small HD 702 Touch, well, I sold it, and I have a DSMC3 monitor from Red, and then I have the small HD Cine 5. I have great monitors with no latency issues, and I can kick out video feed out from those monitors to a transmitter, so there's no need for an M1 for me using it as an on-camera monitor. I'm only going to use it as a director feed, and I told them that we went back and forth, and they finally bit and sent me the TX and RX, and now I have nothing but good things to say about it because it's shown true to be such a lifesaver on my set, even though it has those latency issues, just because I treat it as what it should be, a director or client feed. But yeah, overall the system has been extremely reliable. As long as it works on set, it doesn't cut out, doesn't interfere, is always running. That's all I can ask for. I've used the standalone Teradeks, and those things are a pain in the butt because if power drops out or if you disconnect, you could spend 5 to 10 minutes trying to reconnect them, and it's just not really intuitive. With these, they're super snappy, they're quick to get on. They've made the project so much better, being able to have client and director actually see the footage instead of looking over my shoulder and then like us having to stop shooting to like do playback off of my camera. It's a clunky workflow. I'm able to do playback and send it wirelessly to that monitor. It's just been a super solid system, and for the price, it's so hard to beat. I think all said and done, you can get the system for $1,300, whereas with the Teradeks, you're looking at like $4,000 to $5,000 plus. Those go outdated pretty quickly. Of course, a Hollyland system won't perform as well as the Teradeks, but you can't expect a $1,300 kit to perform as well as a $6,000 kit. But it's crazy that the Hollyland is even in the conversation with Teradek, because Teradek's such an industry standard, but they're riddled with a lot of issues. This system is going to be so solid for a long time, and now having SDI on my Komodo and SDI on these, it's still going to be super versatile. It's still going to be relevant for me for all these jobs in the future. Yeah, I can't stress enough how awesome it is to be able to bring this onto a set that is a small project where you normally wouldn't have wireless video. It makes my clients so happy to huddle around that monitor and see like what's actually being shot, and like it makes them happy knowing like, okay, like we're getting some good stuff right here. And it's also like a fun little toy for them to carry around, like, oh, well, like we're on a production today. Like it's just really cool to have. And yeah, I always love doing things that make life nicer on set for my clients, and wireless video is for sure like a nice little luxury to have. All right, editor Thomas here. It's been a little while since I recorded this entire video, but thankfully my thoughts have stayed the same. I'm still loving this entire Hollyland system. Since I filmed this video, there's been a handful of different wireless units that have been released, most notably I think it's the Pyro from Hollyland. It looks like a 1-for-1 system compared to the Mars 4K, but I don't think there's an SDI on there. And I want to hop on and say that having the Mars 4K system that has HDMI and SDI has been extremely versatile. Now that I have the Red Komodo, I can use it with the Sony FX3, and the Sony FX3 can use HDMI or SDI, which is nice, but the Red Komodo only has SDI. And if I didn't have SDI on these units, it'd be pretty much useless for me on my larger jobs because I'm primarily using my Red Komodo. So keep that in mind when you're researching these wireless units. Make sure you get something that can work really well for you now, but also in the long run that you can take across many different camera systems. And yeah, I had a job recently where we rented this insanely powerful wireless unit, and we didn't use a Hollyland because that's not what we were looking for. We wanted something that could go across a lot of different hiking trails and just be solid in this mountain atmosphere, and we weren't really confident in the Hollyland system for that. But for everything else where I don't really have a budget, I'm still bringing this out. But with all that said, I have thought about upgrading my wireless unit to the DJI transmission system, and this could be a video in itself, but the whole package looks to be a lot cleaner, more efficient, and just overall nicer, and you can kind of expand on it for like the prosumer kind of low-end professional stuff. If I'm doing anything with a first AC and they're pulling my focus, it's always gonna be a Teradek or something of that caliber. The DJI system looks really nice. You get a 7-inch monitor, you can pull focus from that, and that pairs perfectly with the DJI Focus Pro, which was released recently, and that looks to be like a really nice wireless focus unit, especially for a solo operator, or if I have a first AC that's going to be pulling focus like not too intensely. But yeah, that system is $2,500. This Hollyland system is sub $1,000, so it's hard committing to that when it's not really that big of a necessity. But the main draw of the DJI system is that I can get a V-mount plate for the transmitter. So on my Red Komodo, I can go V-mount plate to the tilted plate, and then I could put the transmitter on there and then put my battery on the back of the transmitter. So there's no more rigging it on the side, which would be cool, but it makes the camera a lot longer. So who knows? I've used that system before and it worked really well. And I like having that 7-inch monitor, but maybe Hollyland, if you make a 7-inch Mars M1, I think that would be like a good middle ground, just because the 5-inch is sometimes a little too small, but it's better than nothing. Yeah, those are my thoughts after a few months of sitting on making this video. So yeah, let's move into the outro. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about the Hollyland system or DJI or Pterodex or whatever, feel free to leave them down below. Again, you can't go wrong with this kit. The price is right. I definitely wouldn't buy the TX and RX together. I would just buy the TX and then the Mars M1 monitor. For me personally, I haven't used the RX that much because I don't have access to another like standalone monitor. It's been a super solid kit. I'm really excited to see what kind of upgrades they do in the long run to this system, because it's super solid and it's insane how well it works, because usually like what you pay is what you get, but with this system that's totally not the case. It's super solid. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.